It's easy to cherry pick these studies. I could find evidence for anything you can tell me. You could tell me like, I think carbs are bad for you. I think protein's bad for you. I think fat is bad for you. And I can make an argument for all those, but those are the only 3 macros we have, right? So you have to eat some of them, but most people adapt to exercise. But there's like a small percentage of people that don't adapt, or they even get worse.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, unfortunately, there are not 100% of people won't adapt to the same training program. So maybe they need a different program, different diet. People are intermittent fasting thinking it's going to make them live longer. There's some data to support that, but I don't know if it's going to be like the all being thing for every diet.
This episode is going to be a little different today because I get to speak to somebody that has a vast amount of knowledge about something that I'm very passionate about when it comes to fitness and how your body works, how you get in shape, how you build muscle, how the human body works in general. So I'm excited to have Jimmy Bagley from San Francisco State on my show. He is a kinesiologist who went to Ball State University, and he's been doing a lot of research in terms of what makes the human body work, how your muscles work, research that could pretty much break through how to get through diabetes and obesity treatment. So I'm very excited to talk to him today. But Jimmy, thank you for coming on the show today.
No, thanks, Mike. I appreciate you having me.
So for the audience, can you give us about a 30-second spiel about who you are, where you came from, and the type of research that you actually do? And we'll get right into it.
Yeah, so I'm Jimmy Bagley. I have a PhD, like you said, in human bioenergetics from the Human Performance Lab at Ball State. That's a big fancy word for basically exercise physiology. So
Got it.
Exercise is what we're talking about, and physiology is how the body works. So that's kind of my background. My focus is in skeletal muscle, so we'll talk about that, but also sport performance, starting to get into working with space flight and things like what can happen to your body when you go to space, which is similar to things like aging or disuse from injuries and stuff. So yeah, I'm happy to get into any. The problem with me is I'm interested in everything almost. So my research areas just keep going. But
well, that's what keeps you going. You got to find ways to be passionate about something. But how did you get into this field specifically? Did you fall into it, or you always knew you wanted to go in this field?
No, it's like one of those things. I was an athlete in high school, and then I went to community college. I played water polo and swam. So I know you have a lot of football players on here. I tried football. Wasn't my thing. I tried it for a year though. I tried almost every sport, but I was a water person, I realized. And so surfing, swimming, water polo. And then my freshman year of undergrad, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was undeclared, right? I was like doing general studies, kind of just finding my way. And I took a physiology class. And that's what really kicked it off, was like, well, this whole book is about how your body works. And then I was thinking like exercise, how can we increase performance at the time, or aesthetics, or how, health, all that. And then I ended up getting my master's degree during the recession. Being a millennial, remember back in 2008, 2009 was kind of a wild time to look for jobs. And so I decided to go to grad school, not really knowing what I wanted to do, personal training. I was a lifeguard at the beach. I had a lot of different jobs, and I ended up having a professor named Dr. Dan Judelson. He works at Nike now, actually. He's kind of a big researcher there. So it's kind of cool. But he was my professor. Right, I know it. And we were down at Cal State Fullerton at the time, and I took a class with him, environmental exercise physiology. And it was about what happens to your body, not just during exercise, but what about in the heat or cold or altitude or space flight or underwater. And that stuff, really got me going. And then from there, I was like, can you get a job doing research with this? And they're like, yeah, that's like a thing. So decided to become an exercise physiologist probably like 12 years ago, and just been doing it ever since.
You've been doing it ever since. That is awesome, man. Well, let's get to the part that I think a lot of people always want to hear about, which is, I'm trying to get stronger. I'm trying to get big muscles. I want a six pack, the whole thing that everybody in this world wants. Now, from your point of view, when you think about it from the research side, how does that actually work? And what do a lot of people maybe not understand about how the human body works, or your individual body, when it comes to trying to build the ideal shape that you want?
Yeah, I think the key thing that people need to understand that we don't really think of, because we don't think about big words like this, but think about homeostasis. Like, do you know what homeostasis means?
Body just said, this is the natural state. I'm comfortable. I don't want changes.
Right. So right now we're like sitting at homeostasis, relatively low resting heart rate, got some water, the temperature's not so bad, right? We're doing okay. If you lived your whole life like that, that'd be comfortable, but you're not going to adapt. Right. So the whole key is you got to change homeostasis. So you got to increase that heart rate. You got to increase the load on your muscles over time. And just changing homeostasis a little bit here and there is going to cause these adaptations to happen. And then the science is like knowing exactly what to do to cause those adaptations, to change it, not to be too much. Overtraining, is pretty common. And that's too much change in homeostasis, too fast.
Wow. So how does this research actually work? Like When you go into a research project about, let's say, muscle building and how the muscles break down and repair themselves, what's the first step that you do to even get going with it? Do you start with a hypothesis and then say, we want to figure out how some people just can grow muscle faster than others? How does that work?
That's a good point. So the first step is what I teach my grad students is go to the literature and see what people have already done. So if you have a question like, how do you gain muscle mass the fastest? You can go on things like Google Scholar or one of these databases that have peer-reviewed articles and search. There's thousands, millions of articles probably on muscle hypertrophy, muscle growth, right? And then from there, it's finding out what's the latest, I would say, position stand or latest consensus in the field. And that's always going to be slightly changing. So it's a process to do, and most people don't have time to do that. So what do? You go and find an expert and get their opinion, and that's usually based on some evidence. So pick your experts, right, number one, or go and do the deep dig yourself. And that's what you would do if you came to grad school, right? You would go spend a year or two just reading and making sure nobody's done your idea first. So if you have this idea and a hypothesis, odds are somebody's probably done it in some way, shape, or another.
Wow. So what do people tend to get wrong in their interpretation? People are busy. They just want, like, give me the 5-minute quick notes or cliff notes version about how do I build a stronger body? How do I get bigger biceps? And of course, if you're the person on the other side of the mic, you want to tell people the simple stuff because they're going to absorb it more. But then what gets lost in translation, like the factors about how each individual bodies work, or how, what maybe one person in one part of the country or one part of the world may adapt to something that somebody else living in a different part may not. Have you seen that?
Yeah, well, that's the hard thing about any field, right? The more you learn about a field, the more you realize how complicated it is. Like I could give you the cliff notes, or I have students in class, sometimes they'll make, what's it called, like infographic, right? Like a one post for Instagram or something like that. And you can get quite a bit of info on a square with a couple hundred words, but it's not going to be as much as the whole textbook. Like I can tell you, to gain muscle mass, you need to increase the weight that you're loading on the muscle. That's super basic, but how do you do that? That might take a couple minutes for me to explain a little bit, then an hour, then maybe you could take a whole class. I teach a class called muscle physiology. It's literally all about that, but it's 16 weeks long, and that's not even everything. And then I've been studying this for, like I said, 12 years and just scratching the surface still. So you can't know everything.
Right.
At some point you got to take somebody's word for it, or, spend a lot of time digging.
Well, how's it adapted? Like, have things come up recently that have sort of challenged what you guys thought you knew, or what the industry thought they knew 20 years ago, 30 years ago? We thought it was this, and now this new technology comes out that says, actually, we've been looking at this wrong the whole way. Have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, that's a lot. Well, the thing about science too is when you start studying the scientific method, right? It sounds boring when I mention that in class, day one, scientific method, and students start falling asleep. But it's really like, this is the evidence that we have, and we've built it over time, and the evidence is built, like you said, by technology. So in 1950, we didn't know what DNA was. I mean, like, people knew that there had to be something like DNA, but it wasn't until the mid 50s they got a picture of it. It wasn't until the early 2000s we're able to get the whole human genome mapped. And now we're still trying to figure out what that genome does. So every decade or year or week, there's going to be more to know. I think the problem is now there's just almost too much to know, and science is so fractured, that so spread apart. Like, there's molecular biologists and microbiologists working on one specific gene or one specific pathway that interacts with everything. So now we kind of come back and bring it back together. So think about the original chemistry, biology, physics. That's like the three main physical sciences. And then there's thousands of subdisciplines, but people forget about how does it all work together,
Wow. Does anything ever get lost in the sauce? Like, some people might take what a molecular biologist says about something related to how muscles work, and the narrative is different than maybe what a physiologist would actually say, because they're doing a different type of research. So if you're the layman and you just hear one side of the story, you think, oh, well, he said this, so that must be the correct answer. Not knowing that it's maybe the correct answer through one lens, but if you ride with that only and you completely miss what this other person here has to say about it because they see it from a different lens, that can leave you with incomplete information. Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of things like that. So one thing that our lab studies that I think your listeners and viewers might be interested in is muscle fiber type, right? So, people know that there's typically fast twitch muscles and slow twitch muscles, right? That's two types, but then there's subtypes. So there's type 1A and type 2X, or type 1, type 2A, and type 2X. So those are kind of the three main human types. And then from there, there's subtypes, like hybrid types. There's 2A, 2X, there's 1, 2A, 2X. So it's really like a continuum of fiber. So that's the problem. It's so complicated almost that people have a generalization saying that like, oh, humans have 50-50 slow twitch, fast twitch. It's like, well, we actually depends on who you're studying and what they're doing. And you can change fiber type over time. People thought you couldn't do that it was genetically determined, but you can actually shift it. And we know all this from, the studies in animals. People look back and there's a lot of people do great research in mice and rats, but mice and rats have different fiber types than humans. They're so tiny that they have an extra fast twitch type called 2B. And people always thought humans had that, but we don't. We have the genes for it, but we don't actually have that type. So I guess long story short is, if my colleague, Dr. Andy Galpin down at Cal State Fullerton, we went to grad school together and he did a 3-hour episode on his 50-minute physiology or whatever it's called on YouTube. Find those videos.
Oh, I've seen plenty of Andy Galpin stuff.
So watch all 3 of those and that'll give you the background of where we're at. And that's 3 hours or more. And that, so if you really want to get into fiber types, it's changed a lot over time.
So you brought up a good point there when we talked about fast twitch and slow twitch and slow twitch and how we always thought that some people are born a certain way. And we see this with in the athletic field. Think of like the Olympics. Like there's people who are a certain height or a certain build tend to do better in specific events. But is that because of genetics or is that because they've trained that way for so long that anybody else who was in the same environment that they were, could potentially have developed the same type of muscle twitch fibers things? Or is it really independent about your own specific DNA? You were just genetically predisposed to be able to be a faster runner, or you're predisposed to be a heavier power lifter. But you can still play with it though, right?
Yeah, I think it's all that. The problem is it's not, people say nature versus nurture, right? Is it the DNA or is it your environment? And it's both. And I think the nature part, the DNA part might dictate how much you can adapt. So let's say that, you grew up in a small town and you didn't have access to a football team or whatever, and you're in some small town, no access. You could grow up your whole life and not know your potential. You could live in another town, right, and be the exact same person and make it to the NFL. So that's just your environment, like your socio-cultural environment. That's one thing. But what about if you had perfect training, perfect genetics? That's the idea, but not everybody is able to mix and match all those, So I would say an ex-athlete I was an athlete, but I was never going to make it to the Olympics, no matter how hard I tried. That's just wasn't in the cards for me because my genetics wasn't there, but I could make it as far as I could, community college was it. So,
well, that's a big thing there because if you kind of came to terms to that early saying, hey, I can be a really great water polo player, but there's no way I can compete with the best of the best in the world. But why is that? Is it because you weren't a certain height? Is it because your arm length wasn't what makes you go in that realm and say, no matter how much I try, I just couldn't, I can't compete with the best of the best?
Well, I mean, it's different. So think about it's almost like a video game. You have all these attributes, right? Like strength, endurance, agility. If I was a foot taller, it would have helped a lot. I still probably wouldn't have quite made it to the Olympics though, because there's also speed, you got speed and you got all these other things. So it's really getting all the right stuff at the right time and being at the right place at the right time. I guess one example is imagine if you were born in the same place, same thing, but 50 years ago, 50 years before, you might not have had the same opportunities as now. What about 50 years in the future? I mean, who knows what sports will be like then or whatever. So
yeah, it's one of those things. Somebody who's brand new that wants to go to the gym and they're trying to learn everything that everybody's doing. They may look at somebody and say, I want his body type or I want her body type, and say, what are you doing? Okay, so if I do what you do, I'm going to get the same results, right? And then they may do the same exact workout, and the results that they're getting are not as comparable. They're still fit, they're still in good shape for their body, but they're comparing themselves to somebody else that maybe just has different genes. And one thing with that I've always heard about is the amount of fat cells that we have. Is that something that you are specialized in terms of fat muscle?
Well, I know a little bit about fat cells. I'm not like a fat physiology researcher. It is getting really popular though, because fat cells and every cell in your body are also, they send signals out. They send other signals out. So depending on how much fat you have, it could dictate how much muscle you're going to grow and this and that. So a lot of the research now with fat, one thing is this, we can get into this too, the stem cells or the cells that make muscle cells are the same ones that make fat cells. So if you were to get liposuction or something, right, you would remove fat cells, you're going to grow some fat cells back. They're going to change size and stuff. So
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the cool thing about fat too is that it's adaptable. Fat cells will get bigger and smaller, just like muscle cells too. So all these things can change pretty rapidly. And your point to you might not have the same genetics as some person you saw online or whatever. That's totally true. And there's been a lot of studies. We did a study on identical twins. We kind of followed up on a bigger study called the Heritage Study, where they looked at families over time, over decades and decades, and had them do exercise training programs. And they found that most people adapt to exercise, right? You'll get stronger, faster, more fit, more aerobically fit. But there's like a small percentage of people that don't adapt, or they even get worse at some of these things. So
Really?
yeah, so I mean, unfortunately, there are not 100% of people won't adapt to the same training program. So maybe they need a different program, different diet, different things like that. So.
Gotcha. So how do you find that if you're that small percentage of people that's like, I'm doing everything that the book says I'm supposed to do, and I'm either having no results or negative results? Well, then who do you even go to know, hey, this is not for me?
I don't know. That's the hard part. It's like there's nobody like, because one thing I can say is if you've never trained, never done any exercise, and you start doing something, you're going to change. You might not be, you might not get super shredded or huge, but you're going to feel better and be different. So everybody can adapt, but maybe not to the extent as some other people. I'm sure. I mean, I've had friends where they pick up a barbell and then a week later, I'm like, wow, they got huge. Like what happened? So there's just some people that will do that. And,
Yeah.
a lot of that is genetic though. And so, yeah, so our lab has done some research on identical twins, looking at what happens if you live apart from your twin for 30 years and do a totally different exercise regimen, and you'll change dramatically.
Wow.
So,
Now, how about age? Because some people say if you don't, or I've heard, if you wait till, let's say, you're 25 or 30 years old, and then you start actually training your body, but before that, you really didn't do any sort of physical training, that your body's set, and there's only so much you can do to change it at that point. Whereas if you started working out or training or playing sports earlier in life, let's say at 10, 15 years old, wherever, then you're catching it at a time where your body can actually adapt to it better and provide you for more long-term sustainability, and your muscles can, in theory, be able to be in a healthier position because you started them while your body was still developing. Is that true? Is there more information to that?
I think so. I think that's probably a really complex idea, but I think there's something to be said for exercising when you're a kid, or moving around when you're a kid or a teenager and you're still developing. Or, I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't feel like my brain even fully developed till I was 27 or 28. So even training before that, right? Like in like your 20-year range, like doing exercise then is probably really good. But if you start when you're 50 or 60, it's not like bad. It just means you don't have like the tendons and ligaments built up to just jump on, a heavy resistance training program right away. You might need to ramp into it. So
Gotcha.
probably always better to start early, but it's never too late,
Well, that's the idea, but we're seeing this in today's age where, like, when we grew up as kids, it was we'd always go outside and play, go in the jungle gym, go on bike riding, or just go and do stupid stuff where we're getting hurt, but that was fun. And then now we're at a point in our life where I see so many young kids now, and I'm not blaming the parents for this, but there's a lot of kids that are on cell phones, iPhones, iPads, and that's their activity. Is they're engaging. They might be learning a lot of good stuff on there. I have no clue, but physically, you just don't see them running around like they used to. And so we're not going to see it for maybe another 10, 15 years or so, but I wonder what the future might hold about how that could affect the way people live and how human bodies change over time, because you grow up in an age with technology as a kid. How does that affect you going forward?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of complex ideas with that. One, like you said, is the inactivity part, that gaming and sitting around is inactive. And even, every kid now has, not every kid, but wealthy kids have e-bikes, right? These electric bikes, and they don't even have to pedal anymore. Like when I was a kid,
sit on them, man.
I would go surfing and I'd be like, at least I got to walk to the surf spot, or get on my, like, I call them analog bike now, and start pedaling down there. And by the time you get there, you're warmed up. But if you're 16, you should be able to do that. You shouldn't be cruising at 30 miles an hour on the sidewalk. I think e-bikes are cool and everything too, but yeah, that. And then along with just being connected all the time to something digital, I'm doing some research with my colleague, Dr. Rachel Flynn at San Francisco State, and she's in child and adolescent development. And we're looking at virtual reality exercise gaming on how kids react to that. Because if kids are going to game, it's better for them to be moving, right? And, in a VR or AR world than to just be sitting there with your, PS5 or whatever.
Is it like that Nintendo Wii thing they were doing in like a decade ago? Geez, how long has it been since that thing came out? Where they were like, hey kids, play with the Wii, because at least you can play like you're playing tennis versus sitting there on the PlayStation or whatnot. Is it a similar type of research?
Yeah, that was like some of the early stuff 20 years ago or so. And a lot of our research is built on that. But the Nintendo Wii, the downside was it was just one company making the game. So there wasn't a huge amount. And it was not totally virtual or augmented with the goggles we have now. So the technology is way better and it's more immersive, and you got more options. There's hundreds or maybe thousands of games at this point that people play.
Wow. So when you do a research study like that, like how long is it usually? Are you following the same study group around for 10 years to see the progress, or are you just pretty much limited based on the funding that you get?
Yeah, it's based on funding. We work with a group called the Virtual Reality Health Institute, and they were the first ones. I was one of the founding members to kind of start rated games based on your energy expenditure. So, we'd be basically, if you have a game like Beat Saber is a super popular game, how many calories are you using per minute playing that? So we started doing that early on, maybe like 2017 or so. But it was based on some research we did in the lab, and that was just there's a couple different ways you can do studies. One's just a short-term single session study where you're just looking at one person evaluating that, and then other ones are longitudinal, like you were alluding to, where you follow people over time. We do both, but the one-time deal ones are easier to do, and so we do a lot of that. So that first study took about a year, and we've published 2 or 3 other papers since then in virtual reality exercise.
Wow. And this is a great topic that I just thought about now, because it gets into how these things are even put out there. And that's the whole idea of research funding. And, with the advent of new technology, streaming services, everybody's making a documentary on Netflix about how to get thin, or vegan's the right way to go. And here's all the research that points out there. And for anybody who just watches a show like that or does a quick search on YouTube, you might say, okay, well, the research says that, this, and the third, so therefore you should do this. But then research papers and research studies are just so much more in depth. The years that it takes to do it, the control group, the funding. And sometimes people can just pick out that one line that goes with their narrative, and then it just blows up. And they say, well, this research study said that, if you eat beans and legumes versus eating red meat, then you're going to run faster. And then people just run with it. So can you talk about how these research studies are done, and how, God, are they even misinterpreted nowadays because people just want the quick hits?
Mm-hmm. It's really easy to cherry pick any research, right? Like, so I could find evidence for anything you can tell me. You could tell me, like, I think carbs are bad for you. I think protein's bad for you. I think fat is bad for you. And I can make an argument for all those, but those are the only 3 macros we have, right? So you have to eat some of them. But so it's easy to cherry pick these studies, and there's so many studies out. And what I have always looked at is I could pull even 2 or 3 studies and say, well, these all lean towards, let's say some supplement being dangerous, but they were also done in mice in 1998, and they used like 8,000 times the dosage that you would take. So yeah, it might be dangerous if you take a lethal dose of it. There's water's dangerous. We could sit here and get really sick from drinking too much water, right? So you got to think about those, and always be skeptical, like you said, with funding. Scientists have to get money somewhere. So just because somebody's, let's say, funded by Nestle or something, doesn't mean that it's going to be super biased. But you also have to consider it could be biased, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just use that as an example. That's just one big company I could think of. But also, if you're funded by the DARPA, the U.S. military, it might be biased one way, right? So I don't think where you get your funding from should dictate whether you believe in that or not, unless it's coming directly from a place like that's very one-sided. Then you're going to know exactly what it's going to be from. But a lot of people get funding from National Institutes of Health. I don't think that things are biased because they're funded by the government necessarily, but you might not get the whole picture. Like for the last 50 years or whatever, it's been illegal to federally fund cannabis research in most contexts. Does that mean that the research we get out of the government's funding is bad? No, it just means like they've nixed that. So just you're not going to find it there. You're going to have to get funding from somewhere else for something like that. Or same thing with like studying gun violence, right? That's been banned for a long time, and now we're finally able to start doing it at the federal level.
So how does the average everyday person even read this stuff? Or like, how do they read through it to know, okay, am I getting all the information? Have I been led to believe that this is how your muscles work this whole time? But really it was all cherry picked research because somebody wanted to make a documentary that made a lot of money. I mean, how do you really help people get through all that?
It's the hard part. Yeah. I mean, I think that's why you got to be skeptical, but also not to the point where you become a conspiracy theorist too, like that's the thing. There's a fine line, and I think be skeptical, but also when you get evidence, you got to bring all the evidence in. So you watch one documentary, and then I used to be like that. Well, I know everything about this topic. And I literally then watch another one. I'm like, wow, this was totally different. It's kind of like if you have, a professor. I've had like I've taken exercise physiology at least 4 times, which, I mean, that's my field of study, but with different professors, and I get different pieces of the field from each one. doesn't mean that everyone's wrong. It just means like you can't get everything from one person or one mentor or one, so if you have your favorite influencer, your favorite podcast, like if this is your favorite podcast, yeah, but also listen to other podcasts too, right? So you got to open it up a little bit.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm the first one to tell people, like, even if you are a loyal listener of my show, like, I definitely do not know everything, and neither do my guests. Like, use this, get some more information. If something catches your attention, run with it, do more research. But you got to listen to other people. We definitely get into dangerous territory where if somebody says, I just trust him or her, and whatever they say is gold, and you don't even think about the other side because you're so bought into it, and that just leads down a dangerous path. I have a lot of friends in San Francisco that there are vegan. I have nothing against vegans whatsoever. I have nothing against the lifestyle. But every time I hear about knives over or forks over knives, or I can't even think of the other ones, it says eating meat is bad because it's going to destroy your heart. I'm like, okay, I know where you're coming from with some of that research, but man, that's just cherry picked to make it look a certain way. And not that you're wrong, but man, you guys really bought into some of that stuff.
It's the same for carnivore. It's a wholly like the opposite. It's the same like right wing and left wing, whatever. If you go to one of those far sides and you just live in that ecosystem, you're going to get bombarded and you're going to think it's true. I think that's misinformation and disinformation, like on purpose, is huge now. And with AI and ChatGPT and everything, it's just going to get worse. Right. I think people got to like realize that you're getting people want you to think a certain way and they want your attention, and they're going to do whatever they can to get that.
Exactly. I mean, I can't even say much more about that. There's one research you did, I have to look it up, AMPK, that you did in 2018. It caught my attention because it was a breakthrough, or potentially led to a breakthrough for diabetes and obesity treatment. So I figured it would be awesome to go right to the expert to explain that. So can you explain what that research was and where it's going now?
Yeah, I got to give pretty much full credit to that whole AMPK study and the few papers that came out to Dr. Irene Tobias. She was a postdoc at the time at Dr. Galpin's lab down at Cal State Fullerton. And her background is in biochemistry, and Dr. Galpin and mine was in exercise physiology. And she had some ideas about this enzyme, her favorite enzyme called AMPK. And the whole point for AMPK is to think of it as like a gas gauge for your cells. So when your fuel's low, you exercise a lot, you're not eating a lot, AMPK is going to start getting ramped up and telling other things like, hey, we need to start storing energy. It's kind of like, we think of it as quote unquote the window of gains is right after you exercise, right? You should eat. That's been the idea for a long time, and it's still true. I don't think you necessarily have to eat within a half hour or 2 hours or whatever, but the closer you eat to exercise about, the more protein synthesis you're going to get in general. And that's a lot because this AMPK protein is ramped up. So what we did was there's a lot of ways to measure proteins in your body, and we use a muscle biopsy technique where you take a small muscle sample from your quad, in this case, before exercise and after exercise, kind of a time course after exercise, and are able to pull individual muscle cells out of there. So each muscle biopsy is about the size of a pea, like 100 milligrams something, and then we'll get hundreds or 1,000 fibers out of there. We isolate each one, and then we're able to use this technique that Dr. Tobias helped really pioneer to quickly look for the amount of protein that's in there for different things. And we were looking at AMPK specifically after nutrition and in people that were pretty elite CrossFitters. She was really into CrossFit. I think the key to the whole thing was the method that we developed, and then looking to see what happens with this AMPK plus these downstream, we'll call them targets of AMPK. And one of them is this window of gains gene we were looking at. So
because one thing that caught my attention was how a lot of the diabetes and obesity researchers were looking a certain way, and the research that you guys were doing, if I remember correctly, was just about how much our muscles are the biggest sugar stores in our body, and if we understand that, could that really help us figure out what can we do to address the diabetes and the obesity crisis? The short answer is, like, if you are eating a lot of calories, especially bad calories, and you don't exercise, you're probably going to become obese, which is going to lead to a lot of other health issues. And then diabetes, the idea is if you're eating too much sugar, then eventually you're going to overwhelm your insulin system, and then you're going to become type 2 diabetic, or type 1 the other side. But to understand that maybe the body's functioning differently, I think is important for a lot of people to hear. And this was done about, 5 years ago?
About 5 years ago. And I think since then it's been cited quite a few times. People are starting to use that method too.
How has it evolved?
Well, I mean, I haven't done much, since the this was another problem. So this led into another research study that Dr. Galp and I are working on now. It's one of those things we've been working on this for years too, but it's a time restricted eating study. So we wanted to bring this along to look and see what happens if you do time restricted eating or intermittent fasting, where we look at things like this energy sensor, AMPK, and other things in your muscle cells. If you exercise train, resistance train over 8 weeks, and you have one group doing that and one group eating, 3 or 4 meals a day like normal. And so that's kind of where we went. But the pandemic hit, and literally all of the participants had to stop coming in, and everything stopped. So we're just getting around to analyzing all the data we had from before that now.
That's a very hot topic, intermittent fasting. Everybody, I think it had its heydays, a couple of years ago, but it's still a rage. The idea being if you go 16 hours without eating, your body has time to reset itself, bring it back down, and clear all the bad stuff out before you start eating again. But is it more complex than that from what your research has been showing so far?
Yeah, I think it's pretty complex, and it depends on what your goals are. And I think intermittent fasting can work for some people if you're looking for fat loss and weight loss. If you're looking for gaining muscle mass, what our research is showing, I don't have all the data yet, but it might not be any better than eating normal. It might not help, is the thing. So it might help other things, like it might help blood glucose level, right? Like if you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, it could help you regulate how many calories you eat. If you just put it a certain window, it gives you, you can only eat so much at one time. You get pretty full. So that's one reason why people do it, I think, can help regulate that. And then with exercise and diabetes, like you were mentioning too, when you eat, right, and you don't exercise, the sugar's got to go somewhere. So that's the problem, is there's too much sugar in your blood. That's what diabetes is.
Right.
And one cool thing about exercise is you don't even need insulin to get some what's called contraction mediated glucose uptake. So your muscle cells, they either need insulin, that whole system, to get sugar in the muscle, or just by contracting, you'll actually get insulin, shuttled in there. And that's through this thing called GLUT4 transporters. It can just shuttle it right in there where it needs to go.
Wow. That's the first time I've ever heard of that. So just by you working out, contracting the muscles, lifting weights, that is helping to regulate the insulin maybe just as much as if you decide not to eat anything for 18 hours.
It depends too. If you have full diabetes, type 1 or type 2, it's going to help, but it's not going to cure your diabetes necessarily. It's going to be a lot of other stuff that we'll have to do too. But it can definitely help. And I don't know how much sugar you can necessarily pack away with just exercise, but it's significant. And a lot of this research was done in the late 70s, early 80s by one of my mentors who just retired, Dr. Mary Alice Kern. She was working with George Brooks at Berkeley at the time, and they were doing some early research on seeing that, hey, exercise can actually help diabetes. Like, that's the thing we kind of take for granted now. Like, of course it can, but how do we know? It's the studies that were done 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Jeez. And is diabetes one of those things that once you get it, that's it? You can't, as far as we know, you can't reverse it, but you can manage it. Sort of like the HIV virus, where once you got it, we can't get rid of it, but we can help you manage it to live a good life.
I think with all kinds of diabetes, you can manage it. Type 1 diabetes is one where you're not producing insulin, right? And type 2, you're producing plenty of insulin, but you're not able to utilize it. Type 2 diabetes, you can reverse at a certain point. But it's also one of those things, the farther long you have it and everything. And I'm not a super expert on diabetes, but I don't know how long it is. But if you find out the doctor says, hey, you're pre-diabetic, you need to start doing stuff like now. Like, assume that you're going to get diabetic unless you change your lifestyle. So that's one thing that I would say to look at.
Gotcha. And then this next one could be a rabbit hole, but like the influence of pharmaceutical drugs. Does your research show anything about how in the West it's big, take a pill, you ask someone to take a pill. Here in, I think, New Zealand, it's also very big. But for many parts of the world, the promotion of pharmaceuticals just isn't a thing, especially in a lot of Asian countries. It's, more old school medicines. This is what our ancestors did for hundreds of years. Do this. This is probably going to help you. Have you really seen how the pharmaceutical industry has really influenced like the little things that we do to make our body better, and maybe in the end of the day it's making it worse, or we become over dependent on so many pills that we have no idea what it's doing to our body at the end of the day?
Yeah, I'm not as an expert on ergogenic aids being drugs or supplements as much. I do know some, and I would say one thing is, if you're going to take anything, it's going to cause something to happen in your body, right? And it might have a negative effect too. You just don't necessarily know until you've done it. And they've done a lot of research on all these. Like, I think the pharmaceutical company does kind of get a bad rap. I'm not pro pharma necessarily either, but there's a lot of drugs that we have and things, like vaccines and stuff that have saved a lot of lives over the last 100 years. And we wouldn't have that without pharma. I mean, if we didn't have pharmaceuticals, I'd probably be dead because I was really sick when I was a kid. So, that's one thing. Like, so there are good things, but also there's things like they do make a lot of money if you have to take a pill every month or whatever, and it costs tons of money. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I'm not negative pharma because I know I'm going to need some drugs at some point, but I'm also not, we can talk about it too, but I had low back pain, sciatica pretty bad in the beginning of the pandemic, where the doctor say, oh, here's some stretches, you need some painkillers. And I was like, hell no, I don't want to take painkillers because I know, you can get addicted pretty bad to that. And that's a huge problem now. It starts with getting, prescription painkillers can turn into opiates and heroin or whatever. And so I think that mentality is like what we need us to do more. What are the exercises? So I went straight to exercise, figured out, I need to start moving again more and stuff like that. And that helped. So
how did you progress through that? Was it something that just, in terms of what you were doing on a daily basis, this pain just sort of showed up, and then, does your research sort of help you say, oh, you know what, I know what's going on here in a different way than maybe the average person doesn't, or you still need assistance from, chiropractors and whatnot?
Yeah, I searched out expertise too, and it was kind of like, I don't know if chronic pain sucks. It's really bad, but but even before the pandemic, I had injuries and I was trying to compensate for things. I just noticed a little low back twinge and I was like, it'll be fine. It was like a 1 or 2 on the pain scale. And then once the pandemic hit, I was inside all the time, just like this. Got a standing desk, which helped a little, but sitting like a long time and not having to walk or go places, then it started getting really bad. And then I, kind of tried to figure it out on my own for a while, but after a few months I leaned on some colleagues and friends and was like, hey, I've got friends that are occupational therapists, medical doctors, all this, what do you think, and it came to, well, how much are you walking? And I looked, I'm not walking enough for sure. And so his first thing was start walking, then started hiking, started paddle boarding, and started building it up. And then started, when I was in high school, a little bit after that, I practiced a little bit of yoga. I was never a yogi at all, but I started getting back into at least some positions of yoga. And then the last thing on the cake was getting into regular deadlifting again. So I've been lifting on and off for like 22 years. So, but it's, been a couple years here and there where I'll go really heavy and then I'll switch to something else and I'll switch to something else. So now regular deadlifting, it doesn't have to be like, crazy powerlifting weight, but just that has, knock on wood, I haven't had back pain in like 6 months. So
that's awesome right there. Yeah. Now, when you're in the gym and you're lifting, do you ever think about it from the science point of view? Like, okay, as I'm lifting my muscles, they're doing this and they're going through the process. Do you ever get into the weeds with that when you're doing your own workouts?
Yeah, I used to a lot. And now I just kind of like, I like to lift, and it's kind of like a little bit of, I want to say like, I don't know. I guess it just makes me feel relaxed after the fact. During it, I used to get too into like, oh man, this is exactly what I need to do. I need to do 3 sets times 8 times this. But now I'm more of like a Zen lifter almost. I've got a playbook of what I do, but I don't necessarily write everything down anymore. I don't have the goals like I used to with performance or aesthetics or anything. I'm just trying to lift to feel good. And I realize you don't necessarily have to be like you're doing a science experiment on yourself all the time, unless that works for you. But for me now, I'm like, I just want to get down. I have a garage gym that I put together. We have a gym in the lab, and I just want to lift for a little bit and have fun. I don't want to have to worry about exactly what my muscles are doing all the time.
That's awesome. Yeah. Let's get into that one right there, because a big thing that still to this day in the fitness community is strength training versus hypertrophy training. And a lot of people mix that up or not realize that if you're a bodybuilder, you train hypertrophy wise, you look aesthetically a certain way, and that's what everybody wants. But strength training in of itself is something totally different that power lifters are more in tune to do, because it's all about how much weight you can lift versus how your muscles aesthetically look. And in your research there, can you talk about the difference between how your body, what is actually going on in your muscles when you're training hypertrophy versus when you're training strength, and maybe some of the benefits you've seen of what's it's better long term?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So like you said, bodybuilding is more aesthetics, and powerlifting, the whole goal is to lift as much as you can for your body size, right? And so bodybuilders are going to be real strong though. That's the thing. You have a lot of muscle mass, so you're going to be pretty strong. Like if you're a bodybuilder, and you're probably going to be pretty good at bench press, deadlift, and squat. You're not going to be like a power lifter because you're not training that, but you're training for the hypertrophy, for growth. So you're going to have big muscles, you're going to be strong. I think a lot of it with powerlifting is you'll see powerlifters rest a lot and they work a lot on technique and things like that. And that's where you can make big gains. If you're a bodybuilder and you want to get into powerlifting, that's probably going to be a good transition because you're already pretty strong. You've got built the bone density and ligaments and tendons and all that soft tissue we don't really think about. It's really important too. You've already built that up, so then you can start lifting heavy. And the same thing, if you're a pretty strong power lifter, you can start switching to go to more bodybuilding route too. So,
geez, so how does that work? So let's get down to the nitty gritty part there. How does it work in your body when you're training hypertrophy? What are your muscles doing versus when you're training for strength training in terms of how they're splitting apart, breaking up? That's what we always hear, is that you got to break the muscles down to rebuild them up. Well, then how are they doing it differently for strength versus hypertrophy? What's going on in your muscles?
well, think about it like, yeah, you got two things going on in your muscles. And you remember we talked in the very beginning, homeostasis, right? Imagine you're like at a balance beam and everything's stable. When you start to lift, you start to use a lot of the proteins, your proteins will start to break down. So you'll increase protein degradation. At the same time, that's going to tell your body we need to start growing because you're using it. So that's going to increase protein synthesis. So you got this balance of synthesis as growth and degradation as breakdown. It's always happening all the time. Like the muscles you have now are different than the muscles you had like 3 or 4 months ago. The whole protein, the whole cell has been rebuilt and changed. And it just depends on how fast that's going. Other things that increase synthesis are eating, no matter what you eat, especially protein, carbs and stuff. And then obviously anabolic steroids and then the hormones we have in our body do that increase synthesis.
Right.
And so like balancing degradation and synthesis, how you grow muscle mass. When you're talking about strength, you need to do that too. So you're going to get as much strength, but you're not trying to continually like break down your muscles, right? And have this cycle go fast and fast. So you'll see powerlifters rest, like I was saying, a lot more rest, a lot more technique and things like that. So you load the muscle and that's going to give you the result of getting it bigger to a certain point. And then once you're at that certain point, that's where all the other stuff's going to come into play. And there's, bone density and stuff too, that changes over your lifespan. And, that's a reason too. If you were lifting as a kid, your bones are going to probably be more dense than if you didn't. So you're going to have to start at a different point.
So so like if you were starting at a young age, let's say you had you're a young boy and your dad was very much into going to the gym and he's already starting you off using like the little 5-pound weights, 10-pound weights to kind of get you in the habit. Your bones are already building that habit early on, and that if you carry that on the rest of your life, is it just more that you're going to be less susceptible to injury, or you're going to be able to take on more because your bones have been getting this habit since you were a young kid?
It'd be so hard to do that experiment, but I imagine that's what you'd find, that you might be less susceptible to injury if you trained early on for certain things. Like if you do, a lot of kids do like tumbling and gymnastics and stuff, or that's probably great. Anything where you're changing load and stuff. It also, you heard the idea that if you go even to the brain, the neurons that fire together wire together. So you do the same thing. Like you have to teach a kid how to throw a baseball or a water polo ball or whatever, or do a power clean, whatever they're doing. They're going to learn that early on. They're probably going to be able to do like riding a bike the rest of their life. It's hard to teach adults things because our brains, we can still learn new things and make new connections, but it's slower.
Yeah.
It's hard to learn. I feel like I try to learn a language like every 5 years and I always fail because I'm like, don't have the patience, one thing. And then, just getting immersed, and then our brains are not absorbing things like they used to.
That's a big thing, is that, I'm doing the same way too. I'm trying to learn a different language. And in doing that, you're following the prompts, you're kind of getting it. But then unless you're immersed in it, you realize this is kind of hard. But then you see kids, 5, 6, 7 years old, they're picking up multiple languages. They're like sponges and their mind is just ready to learn new things. And then after a certain point, like maybe 25, 26 years old, your brain's like, all right, I think I'm kind of set now. So anything you want to do differently, it's going to be like pulling teeth to get it out of me. But going back to the whole strength and hypertrophy thing, here's an example that I always see, is that if you try to build muscle too fast, like if you want to be a bodybuilder, but if you don't maintain that, then your muscles atrophy to a point where you kind of look like a deflated balloon. So how does that work? Is it just because as you build more muscle and your skin expands, if you don't keep it up now and you lose that muscle just by natural atrophy, your skin just sort of folds over? Is that something that's easily fixable, or is that something that people just have to work through? Another incentive to keep on working out.
Yeah, I don't know. I know skin is another thing that adapts slower as you age, right? Like, and so And same thing when people lose a lot of weight, whether it's from, gastric bypass or diet and exercise and stuff, you lose 50, 60 pounds, you're going to have the skin you had before pretty quick. Same thing with muscle mass, gaining it quick and losing it quick. Yeah. I mean, I think with muscle mass gain, a lot of this stuff that we're talking about is like aesthetics. And that's what's, big for people in their probably 20s or early 30s or whatever. But then as you start to age, I think you start to think about it more from a health standpoint and less of an aesthetics performance standpoint.
What has your research shown in terms of resistance training versus endurance training, in terms of the people who want to run 20-mile marathons and that's their whole jam thing versus people who just like live in the gym and they're just pumping iron, that's what they want to do? What has your research shown about how the body adapts to that? Maybe what's better for longevity?
Yeah, I think if you go to kind of like the American College of Sports Medicine guidelines, they've got a pretty good idea that you should be doing some aerobic endurance exercise and some resistance exercise. You should be doing both of it. And then the most cited paper I ever wrote was with my colleague, Dr. Kevin Murak, who's out of Arkansas now. And it was, the whole idea was looking at how do you concurrently train? So concurrent training is doing both of those, endurance and resistance training. How can you do that and maximize both? Because obviously, if you have a goal and your goal is to run a marathon, but your goal is also to lift as much weight as you can, one of those is going to have to give at some point. Yeah. But you can increase both of them to a certain point. And the whole idea of our paper was how do you maximize that? So that protein I said AMPK earlier, that's the gas gauge of your cell. When you're endurance training, that's always, basically telling your body, I'm starving. And that's not great for muscle mass gain. So when that's ramped up, you don't necessarily want to be doing resistance training at the same time. Like, let's say what I used to do is I would go to the gym, do my 30 minutes or 40 minutes of cardio, do a little bit of like warm up again, and then jump on lifting. Being that close together might not be ideal for gaining muscle mass.
Oh, really?
Time. Yeah. So you might want to, what the research has shown is you can gain muscle mass quite a bit with endurance training if you separate them out by about 6 hours. And if you can't do them, like separated 6 to 24 hours is ideal. If you can't do that, then do whatever is most important first.
Wow. So if you go to the gym at 8 a.m. and you're just lifting weight, that's all you're doing for, let's say, an hour, 9 a.m. and then you come back at like 4 or 5 o'clock and then you do, let's say, a 5-mile run on the treadmill, that ideal time frame in between both may give you the benefits to actually be able to increase both without trying to do them both back to back, in which case your body's like, I can't, energy's going here, I don't have any energy to go the other way.
Yeah, and that's called the interference effect, and it's in the cell level. So you're getting an interference of like, I'm getting this growth stimulus and also this like atrophy stimulus, or like I'm trying to feed my muscles and also grow them at the same time. So yeah, that the whole idea is that I think it's good to do both, but you might not do both on the same day. I like to swim and hike and stuff too, but I might lift on opposite days depending on what I got going. So
Gotcha. And that's a big thing for people who are busy lives now. Everybody's like running around and you got multiple people doing, like 2-parent households. Everybody's working all day. And then we're trying to cram in workouts into as small time as possible just to be able to say, hey, I'm getting a workout in, but maybe the workout I'm getting in is a high intensity 20-minute workout. And I kind of expect to be able to get bigger biceps because I'm doing push-ups or I'm doing pull-ups or whatnot. But really, when you're doing such a condensed workout, is it really that you get to kind of pick which one do you want to focus on? Do you want to focus on anaerobic exercise to get your heart pumping and you get the blood flowing? Okay, that's one thing. But then if you try to also do a bunch of push-ups and think you're going to grow a lot of muscles doing that together, that you may be shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, I mean, you might get more muscle endurance and you might even get stronger doing body weight stuff like that too, but it's not going to be the way to get if you want to get bigger biceps, you do bicep curls and you eat a lot and you rest a lot. Like that's what you do, right? But it's not the same as if you want to get healthy and fit, right? So,
right.
But I think if you can separate them, another thing that is kind of a misnomer is people think you got to mash in your workout at one time. I got to exercise for an hour and a half a day at once. I don't know that I have that much time. You can break it up. You could do 10 or 15 minutes of stretching and cardio in the morning and then do another 10 or 15 minute midday. And then in the afternoon, do a 15-20 minute lift, and it's spread up 3 times. You might not even sweat that much. So you don't necessarily have to like shower every time. So you can break these up and still get benefits too.
Well, that definitely challenges the narrative, because the whole idea is you go to the gym for an hour, you warm up, maybe you do a 5-minute run or to do some jump rope, and then you hit the weights. And then afterwards, maybe you do 20 minutes on the Stairmaster. And then in your mind, you got this complete workout. Warm up, resistance, aerobic exercise. As I'm sweating, I feel great. But then maybe, and you just kind of tell me if I'm wrong, if your idea is you're going to get bigger muscles while trimming out all this body fat at the same time, that you maybe actually were doing it wrong. Does that sound like it's right?
Yeah, I think it's one thing people should know too. It's really hard to gain muscle mass and lose fat at the same time. It's doable, but you might have to pick and choose one or the other. So you might want to go through a phase where I'm going to focus all on lifting for like 3 months. I'm going to get as big as I can, not even a step on the scale. And then once you have this muscle mass, it's a lot easier to, lose fat mass at that point because you've got the muscle mass to help out. So think about it like a step process. You're not going to be able to do it all at once. If you're training for a marathon, you might want to focus on that marathon and not getting hurt. You might not want to worry about your biceps until, after.
Gotcha. This is the old bodybuilder trick. They go through a phase where they're bulking, and then a couple months before the show, they're in their cutting phase. This is where they're shredding a lot of weight. So the idea, I guess, would be they're building up so much muscle in the bulk phase that when they go into the shredding phase, they're going to lose fat there, but they're also going to lose some muscle at the same time. However, because they built up so much, the end result is going to be something that they were striving for anyway. So it's almost like not overtraining, but getting so much more muscle mass in the bulking phase than what you're going to need for the show. But because when you trim down, at the end of the day, you're going to be where you need to be at. It's so simple, but I never actually stopped to think of it that way. Like, oh, that way kind of makes sense. Because we're all trying to fit that maximum workout into as short time as possible. And then wondering why I've been working out for 5 years and doing the same workouts, and I don't have the body of my dreams. It's because, you probably are shooting yourself in the foot and not really realizing it. Now, how does the whole effect of steroids happen? Like, what do anabolic steroids do specifically in the body that allows you to keep, pumping and going forward? What are they doing inside with the muscle fibers?
So yeah, that's a good question. So, steroids, let's say testosterone or some type of testosterone analog would be what people take exogenously outside the body, inject it or take a pill or whatever. What that does is mimic the testosterone we all have in our body. And this testosterone is a type of hormone that can get basically inside your cell and tell the nucleus to start making what we'll call transcripts to make protein. So it's basically telling your body, I need to build more protein. In the muscle will say we need to build more. And that on top of eating and stressing out the muscle, like we said, loading it a little bit, all three of those things are going to cause the muscles to continue to grow. And so, everybody's got these receptors for testosterone in their body, in their cells, and those receptors are pretty sensitive. As soon as testosterone binds to it, it's going to say, hey, we got to grow because of this. You start putting in 100 times or dozens of times the amount of testosterone that you normally have. Those receptors are going to still say like, hey, we got to do this, but they're going to start shedding. You're going to start losing receptors potentially, so you need more to get the same effect, kind of like with caffeine. I'm definitely addicted to caffeine. I did drink it in the morning, but I have less receptors than if I didn't drink caffeine. So
now can you reset that over time? If you've been, for example, caffeine, you've been taking 3 cups of coffee every day and you're so used to it, and then one day you say, you know what, I'm off of coffee. Does your body reset itself, or is that the new homeostasis?
You'll change back, right? It just might be painful. I don't know if I've had caffeine headache withdrawals, right? And that means I'm addicted. And you go through that 2 or 3 days, then it'll go away, maybe a week or so, and you'll get back to baseline. So that would be like a people say a T break or a tolerance break or whatever from any drug. Like that's how you kind of get set back. But some drugs are really hard to get off of, like things like heroin or nicotine.
Yeah. We see that on the streets over here all the time. It's they try to get off, and then the second that they get that, which is like, got to go back to it, and it's just how your bodies are working that way. Here's a good one though. Testosterone. Do you consider yourself an expert or know a lot about how the hormone works?
Definitely not. Endocrinologist would be somebody that knows how it interacts with all kinds of stuff. But I would think of myself as a muscle cell physiologist. So I can kind of know what happens when it gets there and stuff, but I know it interacts with everything in your body. So if you take testosterone, it's not just your muscles it's every cell.
So does it just seem from what your research is telling you that somebody with a higher level of testosterone, whether it's age or whether you're taking it androgynously, that it's going to be able to repair those muscles faster and get them to grow bigger in the same way that the anabolic steroids do, or versus somebody who just maybe naturally doesn't have a lot of testosterone?
Well, think about the anabolic steroids as I would say orders of magnitude more powerful than any of us have naturally. And so you could measure the testosterone in my blood and your blood, and it's not going to tell us which one is stronger or which one could lift the most weight or which one has the potential to, as long as we're within a quote unquote normal range. If you're like below, then you have low T, then it might. But if we're in this normal range, but if I were to test you and you were 10 times higher than me, probably you're going to have others, So it's like, I think that people have tried to measure that, like, even especially a lot of the stuff, I don't know if we're going to get into it, but things like transgender athletes, people measuring the testosterone level, it's really hard to say that that's going to give somebody a boost in performance or in hypertrophy just by measuring their blood testosterone, because you can't measure how many receptors they have too.
Well, that's definitely going to open up a lot of questions on that one. I mean, that's a whole big debate about if you were born a man and now you're transitioned to a woman and you're competing in women's sports. Well, you're naturally just more predisposed to do better at specific athletics because you were born a man. I have no idea how the hormones change if you are taking more estrogen and that type of hormone, how that would affect you or degrade your performance, if you will, or make things more even. But I can definitely see why people have that argument. It's like it's almost like you're cheating the whole system. It's like now the women who are trying to compete in that, the natural born women who are trying to compete in that field, they can't compete. But it's what, so if what I'm hearing you is true, is that even if you have a specific testosterone level or whatnot in a certain range, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be performing better than maybe your female counterparts will.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think this whole topic is super hard because it's so complex. All right. And there's a lot of feelings and there's a lot of, like literal lives at stake with this kind of stuff too. And I'm not an expert on transgender athletes or even, like I said, endocrinology, things like that. Some research has come out of Scandinavia. One of my colleagues, Tommy Lundberg, out of Karolinska, has done some work on gender and stuff like that. The only thing I could say about biological sex and muscle is if I took a muscle biopsy from you and then from a biological woman, and I looked at them under the microscope and looked at the proteins and all kinds of stuff, without looking at the DNA, I wouldn't be able to tell if it's from a man or a woman or
Really?
somebody that's transgender. But if you took the entire body and said, this is the amount of muscle mass to fat mass, you could probably guess, pretty well whether it's a male or female. But just looking at the muscle itself, it's the same. It'd be almost hard to say this is you could tell a mouse muscle from a human because they're much smaller fibers, but altogether they're real similar at the muscle level.
So are just men naturally more predisposed to have more of their muscle in their upper body and women in their lower body? That's kind of been the thing that people say, is that women are stronger with their lower body muscles. It's easier for them to develop their quads or lift more weight with their legs versus men, that we've developed over time the ability to say we need more muscle up on our upper bodies. So that's what we're predisposed to focus on. Is there, like, how much, I'm sure that there is truth in it, but from your point of view, like, what does your research show you in terms of men versus women, where the muscle is predominantly, preferred to grow at?
Yeah, I think anecdotally, I would say that that's true. Just looking across a gym, right? You usually see men with bigger upper bodies. But if you looked at their lower body, it's pretty big too. It just doesn't look as big because their upper body is so much bigger for men. But I think, yeah, having, going through male puberty, having all those hormones at that specific time is going to cause changes to bone structure and tendon morphology and muscles. And yeah, men tend to grow more, facial hair, for example, too. That's another thing that's, happens during puberty and stuff. But yeah, I think the upper body thing also, it could be cultural. Think about it. Looking around, guys tend to want to look like a Marvel comic superhero or whatever. And what do those guys always have? Huge upper bodies. That's not necessarily maybe the default for everybody, but if you start lifting upper body more, you're going to get a bigger upper body, whether you're a man or a woman. And women might actually grow faster. That's what we've seen too, is that women can put on muscle mass pretty fast. A lot of times, and it might be cultural, is maybe they're underfed for trying to grow. And if you put them on a heavier feeding regimen plus exercise, you can grow fast.
So does your research ever go back into our ancestors and say, do you guys powwow with, like, what do you call it? Biology. I'm trying to think of the right term, like not evolutionary biologist. I'm not sure, like anthropologists or whatever, that said, I've been studying human beings for up to 1,000 years, and I've seen the development of it. Do you ever kind of powwow and piggyback on that to see how the body has developed? Or from your research is pretty much, as human beings, we're all homeostasis wise in the same boat?
I think all that stuff's pretty fascinating too. Like how our lives right now, sitting at this table with computers all around us, is not how our ancient ancestors lived. Not even our ancestors 100 years ago lived, or let alone 1,000 or 5,000 or before. Farming 10 or 20,000 years ago, people were moving all day. Pretty much you had to move unless you were resting and you had time to hang out and talk or whatever. So people are really good at communicating because we sit around and talk, we have time, but also finding things, hunting things, fishing, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I like to think about anthropology. That was one of my ideas. I wanted to be an archaeologist, you know, kind of like an Indiana Jones nerd as a kid, and
Yeah.
thinking that's how it was really going to be. But it's archaeology. My uncle was an archaeologist. It's really just a lot of sitting outside and dusting things off.
So you didn't find the
Yeah,
Temple of Doom?
yeah. I thought I would find it, but no. But yeah, I took archaeology class and I thought that was cool. But combining physiology to that, yeah, our physiology hasn't changed, like you said, in like 200,000 years, pretty much. We're real similar. If you got dropped off back then, your physiology is the same. You might be bigger and stronger because your vitamins you've been eating compared to if you were, you know, probably be malnourished back then.
Right.
But
And that's another thing is how far do you get into diet in your research in terms of carbs, protein, the type of protein? Do you guys do research on how it all affects muscles with that?
I don't do research necessarily on diet, but you always have to take it into account. There's so many, I mean, there's, you know, people that just study nutrition, people that study the interactions with all this. But if we're doing a study like this time restricted eating study, we work with dietitians and they're the ones working with those, you know, participants to get their diet all dialed in. But yeah, you got to always take into account. Same thing with sleep, rest, hydration. All these things are like super important. Exercise is one component to your life, and that's just specific. That's what I study specifically. But I got to think about it all.
Right. It's you know, in our new day and age where the research is just you go on Google or YouTube and you just type in what you want to search and all these things come up, and then you start seeing the same narrative around what you're supposed to eat, how you're supposed to train, how you're supposed to get rest and recovery and whatnot. That's a good one that we didn't get into yet is the recovery aspect of it. So in terms of building muscle back, we I think we all know that muscle is built in the recovery stage, and not when you're in the gym, but when you're sleeping and when you're not pumping iron. That's when your muscles are actually building them building themselves back up. And what does your research show in terms of what the recovery process actually looks like? If you could explain it to the layman out there.
Yeah, I mean, just like I said, think about there's like a balance beam, and you've got breakdown and building on one side. So there's like a breakdown's always happening when you're sleeping. That's a really good time to rebuild things. So your body's not using the muscles. It's like I was talking to my wife the other day, and we're like, isn't sleeping kind of dumb? Isn't that like a waste of time? Like you just lay there for like 8 hours and close your eyes, and your brain's still working. It's not like it's resting. It is. I'm sure it's super important for your brain, but for your body, if you're exercising heavy, you'll notice that you need that rest. And the less rest you get, the worse you'll feel and you won't be able to perform. Right. So I think thinking about your sleeping time or just resting, even not sleeping, just chilling, sitting, even watching TV or whatever, you need that, especially if you're hitting the gym really hard. Like consider rest as part of your routine too. You know, be like, I need to sleep good and I need to maybe take a day off here and there. Don't feel bad about resting, especially I think I was interviewed for something and they were talking about, I wasn't an expert in all the, during the pandemic, people were talking about like cytokines and all kinds of stuff that happen when you're sick, all these, you know, things that cytokine storm, right? Like inflammation, all this. And we're like, what's good for decreasing inflammation? I'm like, well, resting is really good. That's one thing is, right. You know, you go exercise, you're causing inflammation to happen. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's bad if you have too much of it and you don't give yourself a chance to rest.
Yeah, I mean, after a while, you realize that you can pump all the iron you want in the gym, but if you just keep doing it day after day and you don't give your body time to recover, all of a sudden, what you thought you could live before, you can't because you haven't gotten your muscles back to where they need to be at. So you can then push further later on down the line. I mean, it's something that we try to, you know, people try to explain to everybody, but sometimes the message doesn't get out there as quickly as we'd like it to be. But from what you're seeing now, let's go back to the intermittent fasting thing because I think that's really still fascinating to me. Like, what does the future hold with some of that research that you're doing now in terms of when you think you're going to get the results, and then what the next step might be in the process of figuring out, okay, where do we take it from here?
Yeah. So I mean, every research study we do is like, this is a thing that I heard from one of my old advisors. It's basically Dr. Lee Brown. He was retired at Cal State Fullerton now, but he's basically called the speed guy in strength and conditioning. But his whole thing was every time we publish a paper, right? We might publish a couple dozen papers here. It's a brick in the wall, right? It's just one piece of the puzzle. And so the study we're doing on intermittent fasting, our main goal in that is to see what happens with hypertrophy if you intermittent fast and train. That's one question. The other question is like, people think what happens for longevity. People are intermittent fasting thinking it's going to make them live longer. There's some data to support that, but I don't know if it would happen for everybody. That's a whole other thing. Some people have prediabetes, they intermittent fast to help control blood sugar. Some people want to lose weight, they intermittent fast to control calories. So there's like 20 things you could use it for, but I don't know if it's going to be like a, you know, the all being thing for every diet, but it might help for some people. I do it sometimes. I don't do it all the time, depending on how, if I'm training a lot, I can't really do it because I get too hungry in the morning. I got to
Right.
eat. But if I'm going through a phase where I not lifting a lot or not exercising or I'm working too hard, I might intermittent fast just so I can control my calories really.
Yeah, because people we get so fat phobic now. I mean, it was a big thing in the '90s that you don't eat anything that has fat in it, and then now we sort of changed it to just say stop eating red meat or stop eating sugar. But the whole idea is still the same: the calories in versus calories out, and then whether it makes a difference that if you fast for a specific amount of time for everybody, you're going to get similar results versus people who don't, who just eat like every 3 or 4 hours. I have no clue on that one, but I'm very curious to see. Do you enter this with the hypothesis in mind, like we're aiming to go find this, and then the research pulls us this way, or let's just see what the data says, and then we'll go from there?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. When you look at science, you got to do a hypothesis driven science. You can't just be like shotgun blast, let's see what we find, because then you'd just be all over the place, right? So what we do is we look through the literature and we say, like, I think that if we eat at this window around our lifting, that somebody will gain muscle mass X amount more than whatever. We have like a hypothesis based on this literature, but then when we start getting our data might show something different. That's when you gotta be like, oh, our hypothesis was wrong. Why? And then you'd be like, well, maybe this, and then that leads to the next study. All right, we can change one thing. When you don't have to reinvent the wheel every study. There's probably a bunch of studies in the 70s and 80s. All you'd have to do is, instead of men, you do it on women, and you have a whole new study, like a whole new study right there, right? Publishable. So a lot of stuff, you don't have to change everything. You might do it if it's done on, power lifters. You might switch and do it on bodybuilders. They might have a different, outcome or whatever. So
Wow. So with the research right there, like when the funding comes in, do you have a specific time limit? Like we're supposed to get this done by a certain period of time, where they're going to cut the funding, or it just goes as long as you need it to go to?
Oh, I wish it was like that. If it was just like, here's a blank check. But this is another thing I didn't know as a student either. I was like, how do we do this research? I thought my tuition paid for it. Your tuition pays like $0 towards research. It pays for your teaching. It pays for keep the lights on and, everything that you get on campus, all that. The research is funded by what's called a PI or principal investigator. So I'm a PI in a lab. I write grants to different agencies like NIH or NASA or a private foundation, like what Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, something like that. I'll write a proposal to them with my ideas. And most of the time they'll say, well, those ideas are great, but we don't have the money because you didn't get the top 10% or top 20% after they do it. So, the funding rate, depending on where you're going, if you're going like NIH, National Institutes of Health, they might only be funding like the top 8 or 10 or 15% of applicants. That's like pretty hard to get. So
I believe it. Yeah.
Getting funding is like half the battle. And then you're like, well, now I actually got to do the research. And then you usually have 1 or 2 or 3 years to do it. And then you can get extensions potentially. But if you don't produce, they're not going to give you money again. So you like have to come out. The productions that we get are papers that have been reviewed by other experts in the field. And it just kind of goes from there. And I didn't know anything about this when I went into PhD school, which is what I was supposed to be learning about. It took me by my first or second year as a PI, then I started really understanding like, oh, this is how science kind of works from the back end.
Yeah, that's the whole political side. Like, did you know when you got into the whole nitty gritty that, oh, this is how the game has to be played? Because if I don't, I think it was Andrew Huberman was on, I forgot what podcast he was on, but he mentioned that I think Jeffrey Epstein came up about how he was surrounded by a lot of researchers. And the idea was, well, they're hanging around because he wants to give them money to go fund their research. And then they have to sort of play the game and they end up associating with them. Now comes out what was been going on. And now you're sort of linked to that whole aspect on the other side. But that they had to, because okay, if he wants to give us $10 million to do this research about how muscle protein is different in men versus women or whatever, then I have nobody else writing me a check. So if I don't get a check, my researchers don't have a job and the study goes nowhere. So, if I need to play that political game, I have to do what I got to do just to get the funding. Is that the part of the job you're just like, hey, this is what
Yeah, I think I knew that politics is everywhere. It doesn't matter what field you're in. I mean, like you said, you got to play the game. And it's not, we don't hang out with Jeffrey Epstein or anything, but we go to like conferences and you're like, that's the guy on the committee that I need to know. And then you go and like, not necessarily schmooze, but introduce yourself. He saw that I was at the conference too. That's cool. So then when he's going to review it, be like, oh, I met that guy one time. And that could be enough to get you over it. Or oh, they worked with so and so, or so. Yeah, it's like kind of like that, but it's like that in every field. You know, my dad is he's in air conditioning mechanics, HVAC. It's the same thing when you get to that high level too. You know, people, different contractors and
Yeah.
stuff. You work with the same people, and then like it's almost like, yeah, that guy's my friend. He hasn't led me wrong yet, so I'm going to keep working with him, and that can be make you biased or whatever. But in science, it's like that too. But the thing at the end of the day in science is like the publications are going to come out, and then 2, 3, 4 years down the road, you'll start seeing if that research was actually worth it. You don't necessarily see it like right off the bat, because it's got to be like another building block, and then somebody else used it. And so I say I published some really good papers. I think they're good, but nobody reads them and they get cited like 2 times. But then another paper I think was like, wasn't that great, this concurrent training paper, and it's cited like hundreds of times. I'm like, wow, you just don't necessarily know which one's going to hit too. It's kind of like probably like a podcast. You're probably like, that one didn't go great, and it becomes like the one that everybody listens to. Like,
Yeah, the one that, yeah, okay, I didn't know if anybody would be interested in. Everybody's interested in it.
yeah, yeah.
Well, that's a good one. What was that research that you just mentioned now that has been cited 100 times or whatnot?
So that's the one I did with my colleague Kevin Murak, where we did it. Was called contrary evidence to the interference effect. So looking at that strength training and endurance training at the same time, it was a review article showing that you can get strength and endurance gains if you separate them. You know, that's basically what the literature says, 6 to 24 hours apart. And then if you have to put them next to each other, do the one that you think is most important first.
So when you go back and you see who's citing your work, do you ever, without naming names, do you ever see where they talk about cherry picking, like they use your research and then they say, this is the conclusion that Dr. Bagley and his team found out. And then you see that, there's more to the story than what you're explaining to the public. And do you ever get like, I don't want this to get misinterpreted. How were your feelings specifically about that one paper?
Yeah, I think when you go through a paper, you'll see somebody say like, oh yeah, you should wait 6 hours or more, cite Bagley or whatever. And usually they're right on the citation. Sometimes it's just not the whole complete thing. You can't fit everything in there. I don't know that there might be a couple times where I'm like, that's not even in that paper. And they cite,
Really?
something on there. And no matter how many times somebody reads your paper or I read my own paper, there's always going to be some error in it. It might have just been a transcribing error of so if you go through the literature and you find something wrong, you can actually email the journal if it's like a typo error like that, or you can email the author and they can change it. So
did it ever used to be that way? I mean, I kind of feel like now with technology and the way information spreads in like a nanosecond, that just the researchers of like 30, 40 years ago, even if there was an honest mistake in there, like a typo, no one would ever come up and say, hey, on paragraph 3 of page 455, you said this, but it was really that. But now it's like, wow, I really got to be on top of it, because if I type the wrong word in, then they could literally drag me through the mud.
Yeah. I mean, now you can get everything real time, right? You'll email the journal, whatever it is, and they'll do it. Either if it's a retraction they can do, but it would be just to edit and they can drop that in there. But in the olden days, you could do it. And then the next time the journal came out, like in 2 months or whatever, they'd say like, oh, on line 480 of the last, this was an error, and they would publish that. So it just used to work with snail mail. Like if you wanted to submit an article to a journal, like the Journal of Physiology in London or something in like let's say even 1975 or 1980, by that time, you could probably fax. You'd fax in multiple copies of it. But before that, you would mail 6 copies of it, because they would give out a copy to somebody to review, and they would literally mail it to them. They would handwrite edits, mail it back, then mail it to you.
Right.
So everything's just so much faster. Like we save a lot of paper, obviously, too.
But even back in the day, it was nobody would go to find those research studies unless you were already in the industry. Nowadays, average Joe can just go to some of the scholarly sites and type in what he wants, and he picks out a research paper from somebody he's never met or never heard of, and then runs with it. Now, how does that? Is that just dangerous? I mean, in your personal opinion, that we're at this age now where it could literally be blown up in the wrong way?
Yeah, I think it's really dangerous, especially with things that are like life and death. Like we're talking about exercise. Like if I don't get another centimeter in my biceps, I'm not going to die, right? But if you're talking about diabetes, or this is what you should do, or like vaccines, or something, it could be life and death. So yeah, I would say we have all this information at our fingertips, and we want to think that, oh, if I can read it on my own, right? But I went to college for a lot of years, and I still have trouble reading some articles, and it takes me a long time. So just to say like, you're not gonna be able to read it all on your own, and you're gonna need to lean on some experts at some point, and then just pick your experts carefully. It might not be the one that's always on your feed is the one you want to listen to necessarily.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's like in muscle building specifically. If I'm a YouTube star and I have 20-inch biceps and 6% body fat, the body, like the Arnold Schwarzenegger body back in there, or whatnot, or Channing Tatum, that's what everybody says. I can just regurgitate, I hate to say it, you can just regurgitate whatever research you want and people are going to buy it up because they associate you and how you look with that research. So if you said this, and that's got to be it. I want, no one's going to go back and double check your work and say, oh, you said this. They're just going to believe you because of how you look. I mean, it's sort of the sad state that we're in now. Do you, without naming names, do you ever see some of that information put out there by somebody like, okay, I know that's not what it is, but I understand why you're so popular. I can see it right there.
Yeah, I think so. I see it. I try not to go on social media as much. I used to be a
Smart
total,
guy.
yeah, I used to be like a total tech optimist, I would say. And then in the last 5 or 6 years, I became like a tech neutral. I use it because I have to. And then over the last year or two, I maybe become like pretty negative. Like this is causing maybe more harm than good at this point, as far as social media, AI, and all that stuff. So we can get into that. But I think as far as research and science goes, it's really the problem is, yeah, the misinformation. And a lot of people think that they're saying the right things and they're really convict, and the most conviction they have, and they might be jacked and huge and look great.
Yeah.
I want to look like that. But you see only their social media persona. You don't see their whole real life, and you don't see their genetics, which may already predispose them to look like that.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And what does that do for the future of research? Like, who wants to go, in theory, like, kids today, why would they want to go into 15 years of schooling when they could just go on Google now? They just know how to play the game the right way, make a ton of money doing that. And what do you see as the future of research with the way things are coming out with AI, which we'll get into?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough with research. I got into it because I've always been curious about stuff, right? I took this physiology class, like I said, and I was like, wow, this is cool. You can actually make money like studying it. I didn't get into it because I thought I would be rich. I thought
Yeah.
like there's ways to get rich doing research, right? A lot of people I know gone into pharma or big tech or in these places, and you can make quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about being in research in academia is that you have the freedom to do whatever research I want. Like I can turn around and be like, I'm sick of studying concurrent training AMPK. I want to study this new protein, or I want to study this stem cell thing. And I can, because I've been studying this, I think if I can get money for that, then I can just switch gears and do whatever I want. So I think the future of research is still good. I just think that there's a whole online kind of public general population that's never got how science necessarily works, because that's not what people are supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how agriculture works. I know that I get my food and I know it's super complicated. I don't know how that works. And I don't think if I got online and read about it for a half hour, an hour, or 5 days, I would not even scratch the surface. So I think people got to know that you want to learn about science. And I think science has always got to have a position in people's lives, but it's just going to be, how deep you want to get down the rabbit hole and how much time you got.
And what's the danger with AI, in your own opinion? Like the fact that I could pull my phone and ask ChatGPT something, and it's going to pull up what looks like a lot of research. I have no idea how accurate that is, and I have no idea what its source is. But it's becoming so easy to just rely on that now. What's your own opinion on how AI has affected the industry and how you can use it to help you versus the dangers that come with it?
Yeah, I think it's changing really fast, but at this point, at least since GPT came out last November or whatever, we're at the point where what I tell, students is at our university now, it just came out, there's a default of a no AI policy on assignments unless a professor says you can use it. So it's kind of like the same thing. You can't use a calculator on the test unless I say you can use it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we got to teach students how to use the AI, right? How to prompt it. And at this point, it's not ready for, I've had it, hey, write me a paper that Dr. Jimmy Bagley would write and then cite some of my sources, and it'll write something that sounds like me or maybe has a lot of good info, but it cites fake sources. It still hallucinates, and
Really?
yeah. So it'll put something where it put my name on something that I didn't write, or change the dates or something weird, because it's trying to predict what's right. And it's not necessarily always going to be like that. But what I have used it for is things like, hey, this is my research agenda. I study muscle physiology, gut microbiome, and virtual reality. I've got these 3 ideas that are totally separate. How can I connect the dots here?
Mm-hmm.
It can actually put together pretty good connections. Some of them are like not necessarily worth it, but then I can start digging and digging. And for students, it might be like, I got to write a term paper on, creatine and hypertrophy. There's going to be billions of paper. What about if I add creatine hypertrophy for aging masters runners or something? Okay, well, now you've got some ideas. So it could be used for that. But I think all in all right now, there's gonna be no consensus in academia on if people are going to use it or not. I think a lot of people are going to be against it forever.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, even as a professor, like how do you prevent, like when you're getting research papers, now you got to think about, hey, is this the student or is this AI or some sort of hybrid? How do you even tell that now?
well, we have a program called Turnitin that uses AI against the AI. So it's like we've had it for a while. So when you turn in a paper back I would say in the day, like 15 years ago, not really in the day, it was probably typed up or handwritten.
Right.
And your professor read it and put comments on it by hand. And then we went to a stage where it's like PDFs and you're doing it. And now we upload it to Turnitin or some other program. And it says there's a 50% chance this was written by AI. Or it'll say these 3 paragraphs are exactly ripped from this paper that Dr. Bagley wrote in 2016 or something. So it can tell plagiarism too.
Gotcha. But then if you cite it, if you're the student and you cite that, yeah, this is what Jimmy Bagley said you put in your paper, then again, do you know, is that the AI pulling it or is that the student who said, oh, I actually read the paper. I spent 2 hours reading it.
I think, yeah, well, I think that we can't really know exactly what the student read or didn't read, right? But it can tell based on how it's written what the percentage is that a chatbot wrote that. Wow. Exactly. Yeah. So it's getting better, but I think that writing has been going downhill for a while. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to write. And it's one of those things where I always tell students too, there's 2 ways you can communicate in the world. It's verbal, like we're doing now. Mm-hmm. And there's written word. If you're good at both of those, you're probably going to be successful in something, right? So, and writing is one of the harder things to do because we don't always have to do it. And now that we have ChatGPT, we really don't have to do it if you don't want to. You don't have to learn how to write or put together a thought, right?
Yeah, it's like the idea of college, we didn't know at the time was, can you develop critical thinking skills? Can you hold a conversation? Can you have a debate? Can you think critically? Which is, for me, was the essence of going to college. What your actual degree is and it's sort of separate than what you actually can take into real life, which is why some people say, hey, I got a college degree. It didn't do anything for me. And maybe the piece of paper you got, if you did a communications degree, maybe didn't get you a job directly. But the skills you learned in college, the actual studying, the actual critical thinking, having debates, thinking outside the box, and you have your own biases, like that's like the more essence of what the universities are supposed to be for. I'm curious to see what the future of that's going to be like with AI, where you can just literally go in and, geez, one day the AI is going to be so good that you're like, well, I just whatever ChatGPT tells me, I'm going to go with that and get it done faster.
Yeah, and that's what's dangerous too, because ChatGPT is like one program, but there's going to be everybody will have like their own AI, right? Like you have your own thread on Google or something, and it tells you what you want to see, or on Instagram. Our AI will tell us what we want to hear probably. And my AI might be really good at finding articles because it knows that's what I want, or yours might be good at finding podcasts or whatever. Like, so I don't know what the future, it's going to be something we can't even think about, but I just know it's going to be different. And like you said, we've got to stick with teaching these intangible skills and the other thing college does is I always say, people are like, what's the point of college anymore? Yeah. It's going to teach you how to read, write, talk to people, critically think. You might remember something from a few classes, you might not, but it also shows that you can do something long-term that has like a lot of checkpoints, right? And I know, it's easy to quit, but it's like really hard to stick with something. Even if it's a degree that you're like, oh, this is something I really kind of like, kind of don't. It doesn't mean you have to like, if you're a communications major, you don't have to go into communications. You could be a business, work in business, whatever.
Well, then there's the finance side too. They're like, wait, how much is student debt now? How much does it cost to get a college degree? And then you start weighing that cost versus, okay, what's that going to give me specifically? And then people are like, oh, geez, why even bother go to college anymore? I'll be like Elon. I'll start my own business. And it worked out for him.
Yeah, but there's only one Elon, right? And that's the thing. It's still expensive. And literally I have student debt still, working it off. And it's a bummer, but if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be in the position I am now. So it got me to where I need to go. And I don't think going into debt's the right thing for most people probably, but if there's not that many people that pay for medical school cash, right? Like something like that, that's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, but coming out, you're probably going to be able to get a job that's going to pay decent. So you go into debt for that.
Right. I mean, that kind of locks you in because when you go into a job with, let's say, $300K in debt, yeah, you have a stable job making good money and you can pay it off. Then what people don't think about is, okay, I'm sort of committed to having to keep this job, and now what happens if I get there and I don't like it? It's like,
Hmm.
oh, now you you got to pay all that money back, but now you just realize you don't like the job that you spent all this time studying for. Like, well, better figure out something because that debt still comes due.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot actually in those high paying, relatively high paying fields like medical doctors and lawyers and
Yeah.
stuff. Like I was, my grandparents always said, be a doctor or a lawyer or something, because that's what people always saw as something
Oh yeah.
successful. They're very successful, but those jobs are hard, stressful in different ways and stuff. And I went the other kind of doctor route, the PhD, not the MD doctor. We call it the OG
The
doctor
OG.
because the PhDs were around long before, but it's a doctor of philosophy. It's studying the science of whatever that is. And I knew I wasn't going to get super rich, but I got a pension. I'm tenured, will be able to afford a condo. So, living it up in California, I guess, as
Yeah.
much as I can. Like,
Yeah.
still working hard. It's just a different lifestyle.
But you enjoy your lifestyle. That's the main thing. Like you enjoy going to work every day. You enjoy doing the research. The idea of what this could do for humanity and helping people's lives get better. I think that's what drives a lot of research in your position. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, so think about it day to day. Research is hard. It's today I could go through a list of everything I got to do, from pick up dry ice to ship things to organize things to stuff that's not sexy, right? This is
Yeah.
boring stuff. It's got to get done. So research every year or every 6 months or something, you might get a boom. I got a really good paper. Oh, I got a grant. Like it's got big highs and big lows. But it's fulfilling. And the other thing is teaching. So I get to teach also almost weekly, not during the summer, and teaching is one of those things where you get the benefit almost immediately. When you're teaching somebody and they get it, that's a thing where you're like, all right, I'm getting my weekly benefit. And then research is a long slog kind of thing. So I've got both of those going at the same time.
That's awesome, man. You brought something up earlier that I think people are going to be really excited about, especially in the bodybuilding industry, and that's the idea of creatine. So, have you done research specific on creatine and how it affects?
I haven't, but I've read a lot. And, I'll say it's one of the supplements, one of the few, like maybe a couple supplements that there's a lot of evidence that it works.
So, how does it really work in the body specifically, like from your the molecular side of it? What is it doing to the muscles that allows you to even perform better?
So creatine is involved in the energy pathway that does what we call like immediate energy. So right now we're sitting here, we don't need a lot of energy. Mostly we're in the fat burning zone, right? We're sitting here, fat is a slow burner.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to get up and start, let's say we got to walk around the block or go to the store or something, we'll start burning more sugar, more carbs. So that'll go up. But if we need to do something quick, like a box jump or just a quick, maybe even a set of 12 bench press, pretty heavy, something like that, where we're going to need to do something fast, or sprint or hurdles, then we're going to move to this energy system that's not carbs or fats. Use creatine in this system. So it's called the phosphocreatine system. And basically you can make ATP. ATP is our energy currency, but while using creatine in this system. And the reason why creatine supplementation helps is because sometimes you're not topped off on creatine. And if you basically top this off in the cell, it might get you that extra few ATPs you need to perform like a quick burst of energy.
And it's not something that we can produce naturally, correct? We have to get it through food or supplementation.
Yeah, you can like recycle it. So there's a lot of creatine that's in your muscle that's there and being recycled. But yeah, you typically have to eat it. And so you can get it in, meats and a lot of foods, but the supplement it's one of those things where when people take supplements, like I said, or a drug or anything, there's going to be maybe pros and cons to taking it, right? But
Mm-hmm.
creatine, there's not a lot of cons unless you had some kind of kidney disease or your doctor says you shouldn't be taking it. Most people up to any age can take it safely in relatively high doses too. So
Got like what, 10, 20 grams a day or something?
yeah, something really high, like higher than I would ever go.
Wow.
Yeah. So I take creatine regularly too. I mean, it's even something you might take not just for thinking about like getting in that 1 or 2 extra reps or sprinting 1 millisecond fast or whatever might do that, but it also helps your brain. So that creatine system is not just in your muscle cells and stuff, it's in your brain cells too. So you can produce energy fast.
So it doesn't replace the sugar that you get from eating carbohydrates, but it allows it to get to your source of muscle faster. Is that what I mean?
So like think about there's 3 main systems. We'll call it the immediate system, the creatine system, we'll call it the glycolytic system is the intermediate one, and that's mostly sugars, and then the oxidative system, and that's mostly fats. So these 3 energy systems are happening all the time, like right now, but right now we're using mostly that third one. if you start to move faster, you'll start shifting over to that more immediate one. But the problem with the immediate one is like it can run out pretty fast. If you get on a bike and sprint as fast as you can, you maybe have 30 seconds or a minute, and then you got to switch over. Have you ever like sprint as fast as you can, you hit that wall at some point?
Yeah, it's just
You'll feel the burn, and that's like that. We'll talk about that too, but that, hydrogen ions build up from lactate. It's not necessarily bad, but what's actually decreasing before that is your ATP, phosphocreatine system. So, if you can load that system, you could probably extend that a little bit, get in maybe that 1 or 2 extra seconds of exercise before you shift to sugar, and then you'll shift to fat later.
So explain that more in detail, what you just said. I just lost the term because it came out so fast. Like, what is it that your body is, like, just how it's utilizing that creatine in a way where if you didn't have it, there's just no way you can get over that sort of hit the wall sort of a thing?
Yeah. So like right now, so I mentioned ATP too. If people haven't heard of that, adenosine triphosphate is the energy currency of your cell. Every time your muscles contract, you use a lot of ATP, right? And so what happens is right now you got like 99.9% ATP stores. As soon as you start to sprint or lift really heavy, those ATPs drop real fast. And the fastest way to build that up is to take phosphocreatine, split that up, put that phosphate on, we'll say it's an ADP, make another ATP, and the creatine gets recycled and you can do it. But it can only get recycled so fast. So the amount of creatine you have in there to start with is going to help, again, get that little bit of energy left over. But you'll never fully run out of either of these things because you'll switch to a different energy system. Humans are like pretty adaptable. I don't know if you noticed, but we can eat almost anything, and we can live anywhere in the world. And that's one of the reasons we have these different systems that overlap.
So it doesn't necessarily matter when you take creatine as long as it's in your system, or is it, if you know you're going to be doing a lot of powerlifting, you should be consuming it while you're in the gym, like in between sets, or as long as you have it in your system in the last couple hours, it'll still be cycling itself through?
Yeah, I think as long as you have it, it'll be fine. A lot of people go through, there's different regimens of loading and all this kind of stuff. I don't know that you have to worry necessarily too much about that, just getting enough and throughout the day at some point.
And the whole misnomer about water bloating, can you explain that when you have too much creatine?
Yeah. So anything that goes in your muscles is going to draw water in there, right? So like if you had more creatine in there, it would draw water. Think about like, that's another thing we learned, we talk about homeostasis is, diffusion in between different things. It's I don't know. I just remember doing science experiments as a kid, and there was like different colored water going in one side or another. Yeah. Just imagine that water will always follow like solutes. So that's why when, if I go exercise hard to eat a whole large pizza, I get all bloated because it's all the salt and the water's following that salt out where it, there. So that's one example. But creatine will cause a little bit, let's say water weight, because it is going to bring a little bit more solutes in the muscle. It'll bring water in there, but not like, a lot. It's not going to be dangerous or anything.
Gotcha. Well, it's that supplement that we've all been told. It's the one thing that there's been tons of research on that's generally safe, and there's really no downside for most people of taking it. So that's definitely a good thing. Mm-hmm. But you brought up a thing about adaptability that, it can be, people can get they can get into this fear when it comes to like dieting and how you train specifically and just how our bodies can adapt. One of the misnomer or one of the pushbacks is specifically when it comes to dieting is that if let's say you're a vegan, you're not getting enough B12 or iron or whatever it is, and you need that if you want your body to function correctly. Yet we see plenty of people who are vegans who are able to overcome that. What is happening in your body that we've been told that we're supposed to get certain, nutrients and elements, and we have this specific set guideline that you're supposed to have this much of each. How does your body adapting to it and compensating for it in other ways to still allow you to function the way you're supposed to function?
Yeah, that's the cool thing. Like we said, humans are adaptable, but it doesn't mean you're going to function maximally with eating garbage, right? Or whatever. Right. But so you got carbs, fats, and proteins. Those are your options for macronutrients, and you can change it around. Micronutrients are vitamins and minerals. And those are all the things that we get from diet that don't go towards energy, but go towards probably your energy systems. Mm-hmm. So like things like vitamin Bs and stuff, a lot of these are related to the energy systems. And you said something earlier that's true, and it sounds simple. Calories in equals calories out. That's true, but everything in the middle is a black box, and it depends on what other vitamins, minerals, exercise, muscle mass you have going on, right? Yeah. So like, that's an easy thing to say for some bodybuilder, be like, it's just calories in, calories out. Be like, yeah, but you also have like 50 pounds more muscle mass than me, so you're going to be using those calories a lot because you just got this resting tissue that's being, that's hungry all the time. Whereas somebody that has no muscle mass, calories in, calories out, is going to be much slower, or maybe they have a vitamin deficiency. They're not able to process things, or,
Well, that's a big thing because if you just go with calories in, calories out, then technically, if I say I only need 1,500 calories a day to function, I could eat 2 or 3 Big Macs, and technically that's 1,500 calories, and I should be okay, right? But then when you break it down, how much protein or quality protein at that matter, how many vitamins, nutrients, everything, if you're deficient in all those, now your system is not functioning the way it's supposed to be, which leads down another big snowball effect and how many other things are affected by it. And, we try to tell people to eat whole foods. And then you get into the whole idea, well, is it organic? Is it not organic? And that those chemicals on that avocado you were eating, is it going to affect your body in different ways? And then that's where it's so easy to get lost in the sauce. Like, okay, can you try to eat so perfect that you just can't beat everything there too? What are your thoughts on that whole thing?
Yeah, I don't know that there is like a perfect diet for everybody, right? Like you said, it's going to be different for everybody depending on what's going on. And like if you're trying to be vegan, you can be vegan, but you're going to have to supplement things that you're not going to be getting from animal products. So there's like essential amino acids and non-essential. There's ones that you can make in your body, but there's ones you have to take from outside. And the best or fastest way to get it, or more sufficient, is usually through meat. That's why people eat meat. People have for a long time, but you can get it from other sources. So you just got to be really on top of dialing in your diet if you're going to be vegan or something. But I mean, I eat meat just because it's efficient. Same thing. I take a protein shake because it's efficient. Maybe that's not the best way to get protein. Maybe it is, but I think that those things, other things like vitamins and minerals that you can produce by yourself, like vitamin D, right? You can produce from sunlight, these things like that. And then other things like folate, sunlight actually can break apart in your body. So it can break down the amount of folate you have. So more time in the sun might be good. Oh, I got my vitamin D, but oh, dang, I need folate. Like, so these are just things. It's like
always a balance and it's like,
yeah. And that's why we have, our skin can change shades, or we can, because we can adapt to these different environments. Or I'm so interested in the body because of adaptations, and exercise. I just think going back to it is the best way to look at adaptations quickly.
Yeah, because you could just, the way your body changes, and goodness, we see people in their 80s and 90s nowadays that like they still look like they're just in great shape. Like an 80-year-old bodybuilder I saw the other day, I'm like, wow, that's impressive to know that assuming you're not taking anything you're not supposed to, the fact that your body can still do that by still training and keeping your muscles intact, that even though as you age, obviously things are going to break down, but you can still keep yourself in great physical condition just by making sure you get to the gym as much as possible. And with that, you brought up protein. I always wanted to ask this. Protein is made up of all these amino acids. And then you hear one side saying you need to consume more protein, but then when your body takes protein and it breaks it down into the amino acids, and then it disperses them around. So then you might say, well, is it easier to take branched chain amino acids instead and just get the leucine, isoleucine, and valine and just take that, and that's just as good as protein because it's mixing with maybe a vegan diet or maybe with all the fiber that you eat? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said for taking those if you need it. So the only reason why I would take probably branched chain amino acids if I was doing something very difficult that I was going to use a lot of energy that day and I needed to gain or maintain muscle mass. So like I just did a few weeks ago, I'm doing research with a group at the Western States 100-mile run, right? So that's 100 miles from Lake Tahoe down to Sacramento. It's insane. They don't have time to digest a chicken breast from its, all of its proteins, peptides to amino acids. All they got time is, take whatever carbs they can, and branched chain amino acids can get to where they need to. But if you or I are going to go lift today, if we want to spend a lot of money, we can buy branched chain amino acids, or we could just eat whole protein and we'll have time to break it down. We're not, elite athletes trying, or another thing would be like if you're playing soccer and you got like 3 or 4 matches or back to back, like days of, you might want to take it then. But these are performance. It's different than, even aesthetics. You probably don't need branched chain amino acids.
Right. Or the idea that is it better to take a protein shake or, consume protein in its natural state and then have it break down in your body? Is there a benefit to taking, whey protein isolate that just absorbs faster than it does if you just ate a chicken breast right after you work out?
Yeah, I think the timing thing, it's if you're really elite, that's going to matter probably. But for most of us, it's probably not going to matter. I think the best thing about protein shakes and stuff is it's convenient. You can carry it to work and you can do it whenever you want. You don't have to have a microwave or whatever even to heat it up. So another thing is if you're trying to maintain or lose weight, think about that breaking down protein actually takes energy too.
Right.
So you might want to actually have that little bit of energy. So I don't even know what the number is, but there's a thing called the thermic effect of food. So
Yeah.
as you eat, it'll burn calories. And it might be 10% of your total calories that day could be from eating, just breaking it down. So, maybe the breaking it down is not necessarily a bad thing.
There was an article you wrote, and I forgot the website. It's with you and Dr. Galpin about busting muscle myths. You wrote it late last year. What was that research about again? What
Yeah.
was the biggest myth that you were like, we got to correct this?
So that was for a journal called The Biochemist, and it's out of England. But we were looking at a few different myths that people had about muscle specifically, and there's a lot, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, we had to kind of go through. I think we can go through the list if I remember. I don't remember in the order that we had, but one of them was that you can't shift your fiber type. What you got is what you're born with. And I think I just saw a post the other day. People are still saying this. Like, it's like if that was the way, then training would, I mean, not just for fiber type, but training would be worthless then. We would just go and be like, genetically gifted at throwing something. You'll be good at that. But we can train and we can shift our fiber type. So we showed the data behind that. I don't remember what the other one. Another one is if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And it was kind of talking about, yeah, that's true. But if you stop training for like a week or two, you're not going to lose all your muscle mass. That's like, maybe in your head you feel like you did, but you really didn't. Like it would take, if you've been training for a year, it's going to take quite a bit of time to lose all the gains.
Yeah. I mean, that's every bodybuilder's fear is, I got to stay in the gym because if I miss my one session, then I'm going to be 5 weeks behind. And then, you're right. A lot of that is just psychological, that you think because you're so used to being in the gym so much that if you miss one day or one bicep curl, that's going to be the end of the world. And you're like, actually, your body's a lot more adapted than that. Overall, the bigger picture, are you going in the right direction? What was another one you guys were busting?
I don't remember. It hasn't been that long, but we could pull it up and I can remember.
What was it? What was it on? What was the website?
It was The Biochemist. It might have been, I think we might have already talked about it. There's fiber type. There it was. Oh, the first one. Scroll down a little bit. Yeah. So muscle mass can only be gained by lifting heavy weights. So that's another one that's been kind of popular lately. People doing low load, high reps, right? For hypertrophy.
Right.
And it turns out, like from what the research says is, I think so bodybuilders figured it out first without doing the science, like 8 to 12 reps, right? Is like 3 to 4 sets. And it seems to work, right? If you read all the old stuff, like from what Arnold was doing, it definitely works. But if you spend more time and you don't necessarily have the ability to lift heavier weights, or let's say you can't afford to buy like heavier dumbbells, if you just do curls to exhaustion, to like failure, then you're still going to get hypertrophy gains.
Well, I think that was one of the big ones that people said, like with resistance bands, that there's only so much that your muscle can contract with it. So even if you're using heavier bands, is that going to lead to hypertrophy? That's a big debate in the community, and for like bands specifically, or body weight, like you just do more push-ups. Like you did 50, now do 60, now do 70, now do 80. Is that still building the muscle? And you guys said that it can. Maybe it's not as effective, correct? But you can still do it.
And you'll get to a certain point where you'll plateau. And that's the thing. Like if you're doing 200 or 300 push-ups in a row, you're probably plateauing. I don't think you're going to get any bigger. But I'm not at that point. I can't do 200 push-ups in a row. So I don't think I've plateaued on my body weights yet. But it's much more efficient for me to go and do bench press and just like do more than body weight, like 6 or 8 times. Right. It's like, that's not going to take so much time. It's not going to hurt as much too.
It's amazing how just by interpreting it a different way, like, oh, that makes sense now. You're not saying don't do push-ups. You're just saying that eventually with my body weight, I have to push myself beyond that. Otherwise, this is the way it is. My body's now at homeostasis is what it expects. So I'm not going to get any more results from that. That makes sense.
Yeah. Look at people, look at somebody like Bruce Lee or something, super shredded. And I don't know if he lifted weights or anything like that, but I guarantee it's a lot of body weight stuff. But he was going to like failure, lifting to failure. Your body weight is doing as many pull-ups as you can. You're going to gain muscle mass.
Wow. That's some interesting stuff. So what does the future hold for your research? What are some of the things that you're like, you know what, I want to get into this one day? What do you got on your radar?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I was saying, there's so much stuff going on right now. I think there's 3 areas I can kind of bring up that I'm interested in, that I'm going down. And one of them is the virtual reality exercise. I've been looking at that, like using technology in our lives, because it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I unfortunately, I prefer to go outside every day and exercise, but I know that not everybody can do that. Or if there's wildfire smoke or create something crazy, right? You got to be inside. So that's one thing. The other thing is, we didn't talk about it all, but looking at the gut microbiome. So all the bacteria that live inside your gut affect your whole body, everything pretty much. And that's been known for a few years now. And now we're looking at how exercise can affect your bacteria that can in turn affect your health.
Well, actually, that's a good point. Let's bring it up. So, what is it about gut microbiome that a lot of us just don't understand or realize what it can do and affect us in other ways than just what you eat?
Yeah, well, it basically helps you break down what you eat, which is cool too. So inside your body, you have more other cells like bacteria, viruses, all kinds of things than you have cells of your own type in your body. So there's more critters living on you than you have built up, which is weird to think.
Interesting.
We
Yeah.
don't think about it that way, but if we didn't have them, there's this thing called germ-free mice. So they're mice that are raised with no bacteria at all, and they don't have very good lives. Like a lot of stuff, their brains don't develop right, all kinds of stuff. They're exercise intolerant, all kinds of things. So the bacteria is definitely important. We learned that a long time ago. And now it turns out that elite athletes or fit people have a different type of bacteria than unfit people. So then it was like the chicken or the egg. Is this person already has it, or can I like eat something to do it? And nutrition might play a role, but also just exercise. So now our research is showing that just from one bout of exercise, so you just go on the treadmill for like an hour or two, that's going to just change what's in your gut. Like,
Wow.
so, you're producing things like lactic acid, right? Lactate. You produce bacteria in your gut that can metabolize or break that down. So it's like, that's another homeostasis thing that we haven't even thought about until like maybe 20 years ago.
Wow. That's just, see, we always talk about diet and exercise. Like if you just exercise and you eat a good diet, you're going to be healthy. And it's such a general term, but just the little things that we just can't even think about seeing. Like who would have thought that by doing a tricep curl, inevitably it's affecting your gut microbiome, because you don't relate the two together, and then how your body chemistry changes, and now it's affecting you in a positive way in ways that I thought I had to take a pill for that. Oh no, it turns out if you just work out, all that energy that you're releasing into your body and the endorphins and everything else is just pushing you in the right direction. I mean, you're right, that can be open a Pandora's box for a whole ton of research there. I'm really curious about that one, because I might shake up the industry. Like, oh, this whole time I never thought about that.
Yeah. It's another thing. Like we know, like I said, we can go back to old bodybuilding. This works, but why? We ought to, like, my whole thing is like, I'm inquisitive. I want to know why. And then if you know why, you can make it work better, or like some people want to mimic it with a pill or something, right? That's where a lot of money comes in. It's like trying to mimic exercise.
Well, that's the danger. Yeah, everybody wants the magic pill. Maybe I'm 30 pounds overweight, haven't lifted a dumbbell in 20 years, and give me a pill. You guys did all the research. Just give me something that I can just shed all this weight, and then I can be able to lift, double my body weight in no time. And there really is no magic pill for that.
Not yet. There are some magic pills, like these new drugs like Ozempic and some of these weight loss drugs.
Yeah.
They were diabetes drugs originally, but it turns out that they make people not hungry. It changes your brain, like not wanting to eat, and it's causing people to lose weight. So it is working, but it's not going to give you the benefits of exercise, right? Like it's still not going to do that. Even if you lose weight and you're at a quote unquote healthy weight.
What do you think about Ozempic specifically? From what your own research or your own personal opinion is it like, wow, this could be something really good, or there's some danger there that maybe we don't want to get too far into?
It's probably like what people thought about ephedra and stuff in the 80s and 90s, right? These were basically like stimulants that caused people to lose a lot of weight, but then you had heart problems. There might be some long-term side effects of Ozempic and these other diabetes drugs. I don't remember. I can't even, been talking for a while, and I can't think of the protein that they interact with. But either way, the whole mechanism besides how you lose weight is that you're not hungry anymore. And so people take that. Also, you have to keep taking it to get that effect. So maybe you're down to the weight you want, but then you go off of it and then you start gaining it back again. So it's like it can cause yo-yo dieting and things that are not necessarily good either.
So it's kind of like that whole idea with body wrapping. See, a lot of people just go to those spas and they wrap themselves in this like body wrap thing, and they shed a lot of water weight. So if they want to take pictures, they look good. But if you don't keep that up, it's just going to come right back.
Yeah.
And so we get back into this whole cycle. Like maybe the Ozempic works for you for right now. Maybe it gets you a kickstart. But once you get off of it, you're really going to have to double down or be prepared to see what you lost 3 weeks ago from coming back.
But I think it could help a lot of people. It has helped a lot of people.
I've seen it.
Sure.
Yeah. I've seen plenty of people like, hey, it does wonders for me.
And that's why a lot of people would get gastric bypass. And I used to think that when people got gastric bypass, it removed part of your GI. I thought it would just, you can't fit as much food in there. And that's initially what people thought. But it actually, by removing that tissue, you're not producing hormones that make you hungry anymore. If you have a less stomach, you have less ability to produce hormones to talk to your brain to make you hungry. So it works the same way. It just makes you less hungry.
Do you think some people just are predisposed to putting on a lot of weight, like people who are morbidly obese? I've seen some people that like they're eating generally healthy and yet their bodies are just putting on all kinds of weight. Like what is going
Yeah.
on there? That's just like a genetic, you were born that way?
There is a lot like that. And we know that there's hormones like that hunger hormone, leptin. People have dysregulation of that. And then a lot of it could be like psychological. Then it becomes physiological. If you have less muscle mass, then, the whole calories in, calories out. Yeah, it sounds simple, but it's really hard in practice because everybody's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just know like if you feel like you want to gain muscle mass or lose weight or whatever, you could look online, and for a lot of people, it might like help them. Oh, I can see, wow, that person got jacked, so I can too. But a lot of people, it just makes you feel like crap. So don't think, the end goal could just be you getting in better shape, right? But it doesn't have to be looking like this person or that person. I think like we were saying, like performance, health, and aesthetics, of all those, the one that will probably keep you going the longest is health. So thinking about like how this will make you feel versus how you'll look.
Right. Long term, maybe you won't look as good aesthetically as you could, but long term, 15 years down the line, you think bigger picture, you're going to be healthier. You're going to be able to play with your grandkids longer. You're going to be able to not have to rely on pills. And, I had that thing with my own father. Like he'd been taking, so many pills towards the end of his life. They would just give him a pill for every symptom that he had. Next thing you know, he's taking all these pills, and yeah, this is for blood pressure, this is for your heart pain, this is for your back pain. But when you combine them, what's it doing in your body? And it's like, we really don't know. No one's done the research when you combine all these different pills at the same time.
Yeah, it's not good for your kidneys and liver probably, right? Like you got to process this stuff too. That's the problem with any drugs. They're like, people take anabolic steroids and stuff. You better be measuring some of these liver enzymes and things because you could do more damage than you think.
Right. Kind of the world that we're going towards now. I'm optimistic about some of the good stuff, but then sometimes these magic pill things like an Ozempic, like while it can do wonders, it can easily be abused. Next thing you know, everybody's taking it, and now it's doing the exact opposite of what it was supposed to be made for, all in the sense of, what? It just all comes down to getting into the gym, getting some exercise. You don't have to be Arnold and bench press, 400 pounds. Watch what you eat, cut out the garbage as best as you can, and you can live a healthy life. And then how that affects your mental health, like just what you put in your body, all those chemicals interacting in a way that we can't even quantify yet, which gets into your research. Like, man, that can just it still gives me the whole idea how you lift weight affecting your gut hormone. Incredible. But this has been a great conversation, Jimmy. Again, thank you for coming out. I learned a lot. I'm hoping the audience learned a lot too about how your body works, how you break down muscle, how you build it back up. What's the best way to find you and your research? And if they have any questions, is there a good place that they can reach out to you at?
Yeah, my lab is up on Instagram and Twitter. It's at Muscle Phys Lab, and then I also have my personal one at Dr. Jimmy Bagley. So you can hit me up on one of those. I'll get back as soon as possible. Like I said, I've been not anti social media, but I'm on there. And then if you're local in the Bay and you want to come check out our lab, you can go to our kinesiology website at San Francisco State and check out my contact info there. And I'm happy to show you around campus and stuff too. Yeah, we're, I guess I could plug this. We're always recruiting grad students. So if you're local in the Bay and you want to get a master's degree in kinesiology or exercise science, come and talk to us.
Great. Well, let's get some people out there. And I hope you enjoyed this episode, everybody. If you did, please like the video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and share this episode with anybody that you know that would get some great benefit from the content that we talked about here. And Jimmy, thank you again for coming out. Everybody, you have a good one. Take care.